Welcome one and all. Let me invite you to take a moment and think of Ross. I don't know about you, but I didn't even know that his real name was Norman. To me, he was always Ross. Think of him and think of a memory. Think of something which might begin with, I remember when. Think of what he might have seen over 100 years of life. Death has taken our beloved Ross, and friends and family grieve in their darkened world. In their silence there is lamentation. In their tears there is loneliness. Lost in their sorrow may they find the presence of loving friends and family. For Ross's love that united us in life and which death cannot sever. For his companionship that we shared along life's path and which continued through the tenderness of memory. For the gifts of his heart and mind that brought us joy and happiness and are now a precious remembrance. For all these and more, we give thanks as we share in this time of sorrow. Is there a sorrow greater than this? Greater than losing Ross at the age of only 100? Let our silence reach out to the bereaved. Let their tears fall on us. Let their anger break against us. Let our love and our deeds speak for us. In the presence of boundless grief, the poet said, "Einod tefillah bisfatai," there is no longer a prayer on my lips. And so we weep because we can do nothing else. And we gather around his stricken family. Help them draw near to one another in their need for love and for strength. Teach us to place our arms around them and around each other, to grieve with them. The Ecclesiast said, "For everything there is a season, a time for every experience under the heavens. A time to be born and a time to die. A time to plant and a time to uproot what is planted. A time to tear down and a time to build up. A time to weep and a time to laugh. A time to grieve and a time to dance. A time to throw stones and a time to gather stones. A time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing. A time to seek and a time to lose. A time to keep and a time to discard. A time to tear and a time to sow. A time to keep silence and a time to speak." And so when our ancient poet king experienced the depths of despair, he searched for comfort and sang the words of the 121st Psalm.
Esai el harim me'ayin yavo Ezri mim Adonai Ose shamayim va'aretz Al yiten lamot raglecha Al yanum shomerecha Inne lo yanum velo yishan Inne lo yanum velo yishan Shomer Yisrael Adonai shomerecha Adonai tzillecha al yad yeminecha al yad yeminecha yomam hashemesh lo yakeka vayareach balayla Adonai yishmorecha mikol ra, yishmor et nafshecha. Adonai yishmor et tzedkecha, uvoecha me'ata ve'ad olam. The living, breathing presence shall guard your going and your coming, now and forevermore. And so we are assembled with our friends in the darkness that has fallen upon us. We raise our voices together, asking for comfort and for strength. We need light when gloom darkens our lives. We need fortitude and courage when pain and loss assail us. May we find these in loved ones and companions. Who among us has not passed through trials and bereavements? Some bear fresh wounds in their hearts and therefore feel more keenly the kinship of sorrow. Others whose days of mourning are more remote still recall the comfort that sympathy brought to their sorrowing hearts. And so I invited you to think of a memory, of something which might begin with, I remember when. Who better to share some of these thoughts than those who knew him the best and loved him the most? Evie, would you share a few thoughts?
Dear family and friends, we're all gathered here to pay tribute to and reflect on the life of a wonderful man, Norman Ross Liebmann. Ross Liebmann, who passed away last Thursday at the age of 100. For a man who loved cricket, he made a century, a most excellent innings. Ross may best be remembered for his infectious smile, his passion for life, his constant positive attitude, his extraordinary sense of humour and sharp wit, and his want for engagement with all ages. This made him a joy to be around. He was furiously loyal, a doer, and a mentor to many. Always immaculately dressed, appearance was important. Crisp shirt, smart jacket, never black socks, always the colourful, happy socks. He was a personality that if ever you met him, you would never forget him. I'm Evelyn Danos. Ross was an uncle to me, not by blood, but by respect and a very long association. Ross's first date with his beloved wife Joan was at my parents, Minnie and David Mandy's, engagement party in 1946. But let me start far before then. In 1903, Ross's father, Max, had been sent by his father from Poland to America. At age 13, alone, no language, no schooling, and with $50 in his pocket. He was told that when he got to America, he should send the $50 back as soon as he could so that someone else could benefit from that $50 in the same way. By age 15, Max had put himself through night school in New York and was apprenticed in the fur trade. He concentrated on the rabbit skin trade, and gradually the wholesale side of the business became his occupation. Ross's mother, Ray, known only as Dear, even to her own children, was a native New Yorker. Dear and Max married in 1919, and within 2.5 years, Shirley and Herbert were born. Max travelled every year to Australia and New Zealand, and in 1923, the family, Max, Dear, heavily pregnant, Shirley and Herbert, moved to Sydney, where Ross was born on the 4th of June 1923, just 1 week after the boat docked. Over those early years in Australia, Dear became more and more homesick for her family, and in 1929, they moved back to the US, to Borough Park in Brooklyn, a mixed neighbourhood of Jews and Italians. The young Ross went to Montauk Prep School, ran in junior athletics, played in the streets, roller skated, and built wagons to race, or billy carts as we know them, out of wooden crates. So, from the age of 5 to 12 years, he lived in the States, in fact, in a very religious environment, synagogue every Shabbat, and Jewish studies alongside his normal day school. The family then moved back to Australia. The year was 1936, and settled permanently in Cremorne, New South Wales. Ross attended Falcon Street High School, very similar to Melbourne High School, and was, in his words, an average student but good at athletics, and played rugby for the school. On finishing school, it was expected that he would go into the family business, just as his brother Herbert had done. First, however, his father decided that he should work for someone else to learn what to expect and how to treat and appreciate those for whom one works. He got a job with Grascos Company, a grazier's cooperative dealing in farm produce, mainly wool. It was in Alexandria, then an outer industrial area, which was many miles from his home in Darling Point and a long haul by public transport. His lowly job was to push a big wicker basket full of wool to where it had to be deposited according to its classification. He earned about £3.10 a week, and after 6 months, his father felt he was ready to come into the family business, and so he did. Alas, he was sent to work in faraway Bombala, country New South Wales, about 80 kilometres from where his brother Herbie lived in Cooma. In fact, Ross disclosed another version of why he was sent to faraway Bombala. The 17-year-old Ross Liebmann was having a liaison with a 25-year-old girl, quite unusual in those days, and both Dear and Max thought their son was preventing this young girl from marrying. The move did break up the relationship, but what Max and Dear did not know was that the Land Army girls were doing their service in Bombala and there were no men. According to Ross, it was a great first job in the family business. On his return to Sydney and having dual citizenship, Ross served in the US Army for 3 years, from 1943 to 45, in the South Pacific area, Papua New Guinea and the Philippines. It seems that following Army service, Max and Dear thought it best to send son Ross far away once again, but this time it was to at least civilisation, to Melbourne, to set up a branch of the business. And it was this move to Melbourne in March 1946 which brings us to my family's connection with Ross. It brings us to the engagement party of my parents, as I've mentioned, Minnie Channon and David Mandy. This became the first unplanned date of the very handsome couple, Ross Liebmann and Joan Visbord, as she then was. Marriage came quickly in May 1947. It was a marriage that was strong and loving and endured 57 years up to Joan's passing. It was a real love story. They loved each other dearly. Ross described Joan as the complete package. Brains, looks, charm, humour, intelligence and warmth. He said you could take her anywhere and she'd win over everyone she met. Prior to their marriage, Joan was a bridesmaid at my parents' wedding, hence a close and warm friendship developed and flourished between the two couples. They would go to movies together, they loved to party, fancy dress parties, square dance parties. They even went to Healesville for square dance weekends. Hard to contemplate these days. Sunday mornings were treasured mornings. the big tennis game at the beautiful Visboard home in Lansell Road, Toorak. Ross and my dear father, with their band of enthusiastic but really not so good tennis players, they all thought they were good, Ross outlived them all. The Liebmann family was often thought of as being regal-like. Joan was the Queen, and she did look like the late Queen Elizabeth. Ross was the Duke, only not so tall. And there was Ross's colourful mother-in-law, Dell, the Queen Mother, once seen decked out in ball gown, including blue sash and tiara. Then there were the Royal Corgi dogs. 16 Montalto Avenue was Buckingham Palace, and sons Harvey and Richard were the Princes Charming. That was the family, and Ross loved his family. He loved his sons, Harvey, who lives in country Victoria, and Richard, who has lived in Sydney since graduating from university. This distance prevented the regular contact he would have so enjoyed. He did, however, feel lucky that granddaughter Nicole spent time in Melbourne. Natalie and Vanessa have always been in Sydney, so contact was not as frequent as he would have liked, but he was always keen to know what they were doing and how their lives were developing. He and grandson Clive had a special relationship. Clive's adventures overseas and in the Northern Territory never ceased to amaze him. He would espouse the virtues of Clive's job in the outback, teaching Indigenous children, and Clive, your grandfather, was always so very proud of you. Then there was the business. Ross, together with brother Herbie, expanded the business into a fully fledged export trading company. Ultimately, they became the largest exporters of sheepskins in Victoria. There was frequent travel, and as they exported to Europe, and Joan always accompanied Ross on these trips, he often reflected on how her charm, intelligence and warmth paved the way and what an asset she was excuse me, to him and the business. She was a partner through and through. I've mentioned that when Ross first came to Melbourne in March 1946, it was to start up a branch of the business. He had a staff of one himself. His father provided him an allowance of £4 a week for living expenses until the business was earning enough for him to draw a wage. By September, when he and Joan became engaged, the business was making enough to allow him to buy a car and to draw £7 a week. The business had even grown enough to enable him to take on an employee. That was Maury Considine, who was 15 at the time, and Maury stayed with Ross throughout his business career, and they, together with their wives, Joan and Maureen, remained the best of friends. Another facet of Liebmann life was the farm, consisting of 3,500 acres at Derrawit, which was purchased in 1948 by Joan's uncles. But it wasn't until 1969, when bushfires ravaged the area, that Ross and Joan became really involved in life there. At this time, both Harvey and Richard had finished school. Harvey had always been interested in the land and had spent 5 years there with his uncles, learning all he could and attending Marcus Oldham Agricultural College. At that time, Richard was at Monash University studying law. And so it was that Joan supervised the rebuild of the farmhouse, Fairfield Heights. Harvey worked the farm and Ross managed the business side. Ross's passion was not surprisingly with the sheep. He loved the shearing, and I quote him, "The feel of the wool, the hum of the shearing blades, which is like music, really." He and Joan spent a lot of time at the farm during shearing season, when Ross helped in sorting the wool, looking after the shearers, and bringing up the sheep. He truly loved this life. They won many awards for their wool, and in 1987, the last year they showed at the Royal Melbourne Agricultural Show, they secured the blue ribbon for the best commercial sheep and wool in Victoria. Over his many years, Ross gave us many health scares. It's true to say he had more than 9 lives. But he continued to maintain his many interests. They were indeed passions. Amongst them, politics, Rotary, and football, through which he made strong and lasting friendships. Politics. There was never a Friday night dinner, a dinner I'll come back to later, that escaped an in-depth, passionate, one-sided political discussion. Heaven forbid there should be an anti-Liberal Party comment. Ross was a staunch and loyal member of the Liberal Party, first through the Clendon branch. It was through the Liberal Party that he met his dear friend, Alan Freedman. Ross was mentor to many a politician and friend to all, including state Victorian members of Parliament, Georgie Crozier, Michael O'Brien, and Andrea Coote. Ross, was so proud of his long association with Higgins electorate and with the Honourables Peter Costello and Kelly O'Dwyer. Ross served as electorate conference chairman during Peter Costello's time as both member for Higgins and Treasurer of Australia, together leading the Higgins team through many successful election campaigns. He was made patron for life during the time Kelly O'Dwyer was the member for Higgins and was also a wise source of counsel to her during her time both as member and cabinet minister. To quote them both, Peter and Kelly, Ross had a talent to unite people, give frank and fearless feedback when it was required, know what was going on locally, and was always prepared to roll up his sleeves to help, all done with his trademark wicked sense of humour. Ross respected the ideals of Rotary and was an active member of Prahran Rotary for well over 30 years. He was a very hands-on Rotarian, from organising conferences to sausage sizzles and involving himself in other worthy communal initiatives. And for his fine and exemplary service, he was awarded the prestigious Paul Harris Fellowship. He was forever indebted to Rotary for his friendship with John and Colleen Harris. I've mentioned Maury Considine's business connection with Ross. It was Maury who was also the catalyst for Ross and Joan's passion for the Hawthorn Football Club. Maury played with Hawthorn and suggested they should come and watch a match. And over the years, this became a way of life for them. Their social life revolved around the footy fixture and when Hawthorn was playing. Bev and Peter Allen were constant football companions through Ross's life. Ross was a one-eyed follower and a member of Hawthorn for 76 years. And for over 50 of those years, he sponsored the season's Most Improved Player Award. Back in June of this year, we celebrated Ross's 100th birthday, and he was thrilled all his grandchildren were able to be there. At this celebration, he was interviewed by grandson Clive. Ross took the microphone, spoke with a strong voice, showed his broad smile, and with his wicked sense of humour, reflected different episodes from his past. It was a very special and joyous celebration. Since Joan passed away in 2003, my family has had the pleasure of Ross coming to our Friday night family Shabbat dinners. Ross and my father would sit at the head of the table. They were like the odd couple. There were lots of laughs. It seemed they were very much lads about town in their earlier days. They were mates for many, many years. They knew how to have fun and they loved to tell tales. Ross was known to tell a good story and a joke or two. In fact, also known to tell a dirty joke or two. As I said, he had a wicked sense of humour. He could be risque, but he could also be serious and worldly. He was always entertaining. We, my family, husband Tom and children Georgia and Julian, Andrew and Stephanie, Georgia and Matthew, have adopted Uncle Ross, and in return, he adopted us, reinforcing his love of family and his very strong values. Ross was affectionately called Tossel by my mother, and thereafter to our family, he has always been Uncle Tossel. There is no doubt Uncle Tossel loved and appreciated his Friday nights with his extended family, and as our family grew to include Helly and Robin Dunn and Barbara and Marvin Feynman, he appreciated enormously that they adopted him as family too. Uncle Tossel has been the most devoted of husbands. He cared tenderly for his beloved Joan in her final years with determination, commitment and love. But after many years of being alone came the realisation that friendship and companionship are so important to live a life of contentment. And sensitively, he asked me if I thought Auntie Joan would mind if he asked a beautiful lady out on a dinner date. How thrilled we were when he finally introduced the very special Liebmann to us. That was over 16 years ago. We loved that he had this strong partnership with Lynn, this wonderful lady, smart and elegant, and so very warm and kind, who has loved and cherished Uncle Tossel these many, many years now. We love that they were able to enjoy so many good things together, and I know Auntie Joan would have loved too that Uncle Tossel lived and enjoyed a full and busy life. Together, they travelled and dined and attended concerts, ballet and the theatre. It was a life well lived. Lynn very soon became a permanent fixture at our Friday night dinners and is now as much a part of our extended family as was Uncle Tossel. Lynn, I know how much Uncle Tossel loved you and your family, Sam and the late Paul, Anton and Casey and their families. He revelled in the development of all your grandchildren and their amazing achievements and became a surrogate grandfather to them. In fact, Uncle Tossel was a grandfather figure to many children. For countless years, until not long before the pandemic hit us, and as part of a Rotary initiative, he would attend Toorak Primary School to assist children with their reading. Usually grade 2 children, 7 to 8 years old, who would in many cases not know or have their own grandfather to whom they could relate. He would read to them, hear them read, how they loved him and learned to respect their elders, not to mention the teachers who appreciated enormously his assistance. In September of 2022, Uncle Tossel moved from his apartment in Barradine to our care. The adjustment took a little time, as is normal, but with the wonderful assistance of the caring staff, adjust he did, and our care became his place of security and his home. But Uncle Tossel never lost his interest in life, and up until a few short months ago, and in his 100th year, he still attended a gym twice a week, always active and always interested in what was going on around him. His mind was sharp and he loved being with people. He didn't like to miss out on anything, including his daily 5 p.m. whiskey, which I might say he had till the day before he passed away. Lynn, there is no doubt that your love for Uncle Tossel was a major factor in him reaching this grand age. And all of us here who loved him, thank you for that. You made him so happy and made his long life worth living. So here I am, back where I began. Ross Liebmann was the embodiment of good attitude, commitment, passion, humour, good fun, sensitivity and love. He was a lesson and inspiration to us all. Ross, our dear Uncle Tossell, may have been 100 in years, but he was nowhere near 100 in the way he lived his life. He will be sorely missed. May his memory be a blessing, and may his dear soul rest in peace.
Really lovely.
It's ironic that the three things that normally are not allowed to be spoken about at a dinner table, these were the key things that Ross wanted to speak about. Why does that not surprise anyone here? David, our shepherd king, expressed his trust in the words of the 23rd Psalm.
Adonai roi lo echsar binot deshe yarbiteni על מי מנוחות ינחלני, נפשי ישובב, ינחני במגלי צדק, למען שמו. אדוני רואי, לא אחסר, גם כי אלך בגיא צל מוות לא יירא רע, כי אתה עמדי. שבטך ומשענתך המה המה ינחמוני. תערוך לפני שולחן נגד צורריי, דשנת ושמן ראשי, כוסי רוויה, אך טוב וחסד ירדפוני כל ימי חיי, ושבתי בבית אדוני לאורך ימים.
Adonai is my shepherd, I have no needs. God causes me to lie down in green pastures, leads me beside the still waters, restores my soul, guides me in straight paths for God's own name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and staff comfort me. You prepare a table for me in the presence of my adversaries. You smooth fragrant oils on my head. My cup is filled to overflowing. Goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall live in the house of the living, breathing presence forever. David Harkins wrote this poem that seems so very apropos to Ross. You can shed tears that he is gone, or you can smile because he has lived. You can close your eyes and pray that he'll come back, or you can open your eyes and see all that he has left behind. Your heart can be empty because you can't see him, or your heart can be full of the love which you shared. You can turn your back on tomorrow and live yesterday, or you can be happy for tomorrow because of yesterday. You can remember him only that he is gone, or you can cherish his memory and let it live on. You can cry and close your mind, be empty and turn your back. Or you can do what he would have wanted. Smile, open your eyes, vote Liberal, barrack for Hawthorne, but most importantly, love and go on. And so in just a moment, we'll conclude this memorial service and we'll accompany Ross to the cemetery. Ultimately, this is what we can do for Ross, which is to bury with dignity. And so you may, if you wish, follow Ross and the hearse to the cemetery, to Springvale Cemetery, where we will bury at 11:30. Afterwards, at the Kooyong Tennis Club at 1 o'clock, I believe it is, there will be a gathering, a celebration, really, in his memory. And this evening, the Minyan will be held here at 7:30 for those of you who wish to join us. When you have a moment with the mourners, try not to ask, "How are you?" If there's ever a day not to be okay, this is it. Instead, Jewish tradition is that we wish you long life. He did pretty well. The old tradition was that we wish you that you should live till the length of days that Moses had, which was 120 in Hebrew, bis 120 in Yiddish, or ad 120. Today we changed it by one letter and we say bis 120, and it means may you live till 100 as if you were 20. He did pretty well. Mind you, I don't normally recommend that you say that to someone who's 99 years old. Doesn't go down so well. Or if you do, you wish them have a nice day. In any case, when you spend a moment with a family, there's nothing more heartwarming than sharing an anecdote. Something which begins with, "I remember when." Something that they could say, "I can just hear Ross saying that. I can just imagine him doing that." There's truly nothing more heartwarming. And so we'll conclude here with the memorial prayer before joining together and accompanying him to the cemetery. Please rise.
אל מלא רחמים שוכן במרומים, אמצעי מנוחה נכונה תחת כנפי השכינה, עם קדושים וטורים, כזוהר הרקיע מזהירים את נשמת נתן ראובן בן מנחם מנדל. נורמן רוס ליבמן. שלח לעולמו, בעל הרחמים, יסתירהו בסתר כנפיו לעולמים, ויצרור בצרור החיים את נשמתו. אדוני הוא נחלתו, ואנוח בשלום על משכבו, ונאמר Amen. Source of compassion, you who live beyond our comprehension, grant perfect rest to the soul of Ross who has departed from this world. Source of mercy, bring him into your presence. Let his soul be bound up in the bond of eternal life. May you be his possession, and may he rest in peace. And we say, Amen. So we say the words of our tradition, Baruch Dayan Ha'emet, Me'emitu Mechayei, blessed are you, judge of truth, who ordains death and yet summons us to life. Adonai Natan, God has given. Adonai Lakach, God has taken back. Yehi Shem Adonai Mevorach, blessed be the name of Adonai. Baruch Ata Adonai, Dayan Ha'emet, blessed are you, Adonai, judge of truth. And so as we conclude here, I'll invite everyone to remain where you are while the family precede us. We'll walk up the aisle and through the doors, and we will meet with them once again at the graveside, or at the Kuyong Tennis Club, or here at the Minyan. But please allow them to precede us so that we can get to the cemetery punctually. I wish you all long life, and truly that we should meet of simchas in times of joy rather than in